Dobar dan. That means good day in Croatian. Talkcast PDX on the web, talkcastpdx.com. Name of the show is the Bogdanich Perspective. I'm your host, Paul Bogdanich. Welcome. It's episode 48. It's February 15th. Yesterday was Valentine's Day, so today's the February 15th, 2022. Episode 48, like I already said. I'm going to call it Chisel. C-H-I-S-E-L, Chisel. A chisel is a wedge-like tool with a beveled cutting edge. So a wedge-like tool with a beveled cutting edge. Second definition of chisel is to cheat or swindle someone out of something, which is where you get I believe it's an adverb, chiseler. The person is a chiseler. I'm part of the TalkCast PDX network, and I have to abide by the content rules of all the major service providers, YouTube and Facebook and blah, blah, blah. And I do, because TalkCast PDX, of which I'm a part, has a lot of cooking shows, lifestyle shows, marijuana shows, public interest shows, and so on. And if you violate the content guidelines, you get everybody taken down, so I can't do that. If I could, the major story of the week, maybe the year, is a monoamine neurotransmitter called cholamine, cholasomthamine, and its metabolites. But my lips are sealed, can't do anything about that. But what we can do is look at the news. We have the CPI and the PPI. Justin, if you could put up graph number, catecholamine is what it is. But if you could please put up graph number 1. I forgot to print my graph, so I have to wait until it's on my screen here. There's a little bit of a delay. Graph number 1, Justin. There we go. Anyway, the PPI and the CPI. CPI came out on February 10th, which was last week, and it's the one that made all the headlines. Inflation running at a 7.2% annual rate, which is 0.6 times 12. And the PPI for January, which is the producer price index, was up a full percent, which is more. But we break out, in what we do here on this show is we break out numbers from the PPI that will eventually translate into the CPI. And as you can see, inflation there is limited to certain categories: cereals and bakery products, beef and veal. And then you had significant decreases in pork and fin and shellfish and eggs and fresh fruits and vegetables and alcoholic beverages, thank God. And in your CPI, the numbers are a little different because the PPI, the CPI, the consumer price index, lags the PPI. And where the 1% for the PPI came from was machine tools, fabricated metal products, other pieces of industrial and capital equipment. But for things that actually we still have good consumer inflation, too much in gasoline, pipe natural gas, passenger cars. The price of those things is just terrible. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Apparel's not good. That's 12% a year. And then cereal and bakery products is temporary, depending on the month and the harvest and the grain supplies and so on. And beef and veal depends on the cull. But again, the CPI, the PPI leads the CPI, so beef prices will go up in another 60 days and then hopefully come down. But chicken's getting cheap and finished, and shellfish and eggs and vegetables. And you can take that one down, Justin. And inflation is a big deal. I think it is what people care about the most, because it affects them. They can't help but notice it. I was last week. I said it's getting to the point where it's going to be who are you going to believe? Me or your lying eyes? when they, Richard Pryor is the guy that originally came up with that. But who are you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? We say that prices are going down, but you go to the grocery store and prices on everything are up. And so I think it's a big deal. And I look at things that might affect prices. And this is a story off the web. U.S. officials halted imports of avocados from Mexico after a USDA inspector working in the Oaxacan state received a threatening message on his cell phone. Okay, is what it said. And this was reported by Associated Press, and it says that USDA inspectors operate in Mexico to ensure that U.S.-bound avocados don't carry diseases that could affect American domestic avocado trees. Okay. It's harvest season for avocados in Mexico, and they have about $2.8 billion worth of avocados waiting to be shipped to the United States. But we, in our ultimate wisdom, because this guy received a threatening phone call, stopped the imports. So when you go to buy an avocado and the price is up 5% is because we did it. And the question becomes, think about that for a minute. Guy received a threatening phone call, right? He's a USDA inspector. His job is to look at their avocados so they don't carry diseases that could infect American crops. If that's all he was doing, okay, if he just spent his time going from avocado farm to avocado farm and saying hello to the farmers and inspecting the trees and taking a few samples, well, why would he receive a threatening phone call? Can somebody in the U.S. defense establishment assure me that this guy's second job isn't reporting on the ground for the Drug Enforcement Agency, Central Intelligence Agency, National Security Administration, or so on? And it's in that secondary capacity that he submits a report. The drug cartels in the area are the subject of the report, and they, leave a message on his cell phone, and our heavy-handed response is to make you pay more for avocados. So anyway, so that, what I'm saying is inflation in food is going up because we're doing it. All right. This is from the Wall Street Journal, February 9th, page A6. And it says, steep nurse pay raises irk hospitals. And then the article's about how they're having to pay 20% more than for nursing staff and so on. And do you know the reason for that? It's a real thing. It increases medical costs because the nurses, they have to import traveling nurses, and all the nurses are quitting their regular jobs and going to the travel portion. And do you know the reason for that? It's the vaccine mandate. All right. Because if you're in a hospital and they lost the Supreme Court case, as you'll recall, so because of the financial interest, they can mandate vaccines, which the federal government did. And if you're a nurse and you don't want to do that, what you do is you quit and you go to work for one of these temporary staffing agencies. Okay. And they don't have a similar mandate at these temporary staffing agencies because they're either smaller or not subject to the law, or they don't receive Medicare funds, right? Which was the hook that the Supreme Court used to enforce the law. Okay. And then you go back to work at a different hospital, or maybe even the same hospital. But because you're now working through an intermediary, nursing temp help services or whatever, first off, you're classified as a temporary employee. Second off, your health benefits are decreased. And third off, it costs the employer maybe 20% more because they have to make their cut at the temporary staffing agency. But the point is, we did that. Our policies increase medical inflation for nurses, right, by 20%. I already talked about on February 11th, the consumer price index came out on the 10th, and the headline there was inflation speeds to 40-year high. And if you look at that, that's true. Last time inflation exceeded 7.2% annualized per year was twice. Once in 1974, when the oil cartel OPEC was formed and it doubled the price of petrol. And then once again in 1980, because it was 1980 and Jimmy Carter was president, and he did a lot of this. He shot himself in the foot a lot, like is happening here. What else? Used car prices. This is a good one. As we saw in the PPI number, used cars prices were up. Okay, this is according to what I read. If you 3 years ago, okay, so if 3 years ago, whatever that was, 2019, in March of 2019, if you went and bought a Dodge Grand Caravan, a Nissan Versa, a Toyota Prius, a Kia Forte, or a Chevy Sonic, okay, and you put 40,000 miles on it in between the time you bought it in 2019 and today, and then you went to sell it today, it's worth more than you paid today with 40,000 miles on it than it was when it was brand new 3 years ago. Worth more. And, again, it's self-inflicted wound. But, so I mean, when they look at this inflation, they like to bemoan it, but they certainly don't like to take any steps that might mitigate the problem. The internet, I don't know. The problem is they can just print the money, right? They don't have to worry about the tax base. They don't have to worry about employers that they're harming with chip shortages. They don't have to worry about anything. They just print the money. So their tax base doesn't matter, and they feel that they can do whatever they want. And that's the only reason that all this is possible. But to throw a bone to his base, Biden approved a grant, big one, $1 billion or more, which is more than $1,000 million. And the grant is for overdose reversal medication. And this is for places like San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and so on. Cities in the South are not going to get any of this money. This is just for California, Oregon, Washington, New York, Massachusetts, right? But overdose reversal medication, safe sex kits, screening for infectious disease, sharps, which are needles, sharps disposal, fentanyl test kits, syringes, wound care, and they kind of made a mistake. They put in something that they call safe smoking supplies. And when the particulars of the grant came out, safe smoking supplies translates in street language to crack pipes. And so, the internet is going wild, saying things like Hunter Biden monogrammed, government supplied crack pipe. And you have congressmen looking for a headline introducing bills in Congress to stop the distribution of free crack pipes. And, that's the way they're handling things. And it's difficult. Again, I think it has to do with the money. Another piece of big news are these Canadian protests. The truckers blocked the streets of Ottawa and Toronto and some of the major towns in Alberta and so on. And Trudeau, who is running a minority government, basically imposed martial law yesterday. They can arrest people and hold them without charge. They can seize their property and all the money in their bank accounts without cause, and so on. He used a piece of legislation that the Canadian Parliament passed in the 1970s when they had a separatist movement called the Quebec Liberation Front active. And the law has never been invoked, but he declared martial law in Canada. Certain reporters like Max Blumenthal and other people like that say that it was at the behest of the Biden administration, but I don't know anything about that. And it's, I note that not a single senator, congressman, administration official, or other notable public official, whether currently in his position or retired, has come out and publicly condemned Canada imposing martial law, arrest and hold you without charge, seize your assets without cause, no requirement that you be brought before a judge or charged, martial law. And nobody has condemned that practice. And again, in my view, it's only possible because they can print the money. If you tried to do that in a regular economy, what you do is you collapse the economy, and then your tax revenues would fall off, and then nobody would like you because you didn't have any power anymore, because you didn't have any money, and you couldn't pay them, right? And your corrupt institutions that are only putting up with you because you're paying them, stop getting their money. And but as long as you can print the money, you can do totalitarian and authoritarian things of that nature. And I talked in a previous episode about what I called exogenous wealth. And what it means is like oil. You don't have an economy, but you have oil under the ground. So you pump the oil produces a lot of money, and then you build everything off the oil revenue. And if you look at countries with large exogenous wealth, what you'll notice across all of them is they're either dictatorships or monarchies. Because it doesn't matter if you don't have a tax base. You just pump more oil and pay them off. Or don't pay them off. Have them disposed of. As long as the source of the power is your oil in these monarchies and dictatorships. And our source of power is the reserve currency. And these politicians that have gotten used to this over the last 20 or 30 years are, I think they're ruining us. But certainly causing problems. Like I said, the thing that most people care about is inflation. And they take steps every day to increase the prices on the goods that you're going to pay. Avocados, gasoline, this, that. Oh, speaking of which, 2 senators who are in tough primary fights and even tougher re-election fights, Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona and Maggie Hassan from New Hampshire, sponsored a Senate bill. And what they want to do is they want to suspend the $4.60 that's federal tax on every barrel of oil. There's 55 gallons in a barrel. So 460 divided by 55 is less than 10 cents. But if they suspend, in other words, to decrease the price of oil by 10 cents, to be able to say that they did something for you, my constituents, the consumer, even if it's only 10 cents, and vote for me. And again, they don't worry about how they're going to replace the income because they just print the money. And it's this ability to do this is causing continuing and mounting problems. And in the context of the Canadian truckers, large protests, peaceful, no guns, no bombs. The federal services up there tried to plant some guns on a few people, but the protesters themselves turned them in. So that didn't stick. Ottawa police chief just today resigned because they're asking him to do things he doesn't want to do. All right, in other words, to break up these protests. But it brings my mind back to 1968 again, or this is a little later, 1970. 68 was when the Tet Offensive happened, and then Walter Cronkite and the news medias switched their opinion on the Vietnam War. And by 70, the public opinion against the war had firmly shifted to be against the war, and large protests were happening around the White House and around Congress. Three times a year, smaller protests pretty much every week. And there was a major protest, and it got us out of the war. I mean, the political pressure starting in 70 is what did it. It took till 74, but the combat deaths essentially were eliminated by 72. But May 9th, a Saturday, May 9th, 1970, large protest. They had surrounded the White House with buses and trucks to build a perimeter around the White House. It's not mentioned in the press, but President Biden is currently building a wall around the White House. If you go and Google it, you can see pictures of the wall, not on the border with Mexico to stop the illegal immigrants, but around the White House so that he feels more comfortable. He's building a wall. But in those days, in response to these million-man or better protests, they would surround the White House and the government buildings with buses and trucks and that kind of thing. And it was one of those days. And this is all according to Henry Kissinger's memoirs. Kissinger says that a significant portion of the 82nd Airborne was stationed in a basement of one of the Senate office buildings across the street from the White House. In other words, they had troops on hand. And those are that's your security establishment, doing what the security establishment does. President at the time was Richard Nixon. Saturday morning, May 9th, 1970, a large group of protesters and the protest leaders were assembling at the Washington Monument. Lincoln took 4 security men with him because they insisted on going. Got into an unmarked car and drove down to the Lincoln Monument. Got out of the car and spent 2.5 hours talking to the protesters and the protest leaders. Kissinger asked him why he did that. And Nixon didn't talk much. He was had difficulty making small talk, if you will. But when asked by Kissinger, he said that he didn't want them to end up hating the United States or what it stood for. And that was then. This is now, 50 years later. And they're going to use the troops. They're going to throw you in jail, take your house, take your money, impoverish your wife, your children. No charges. Indefinite detention. So and again, not a single congressman, senator, administration official, either currently in office or retired, has condemned it. My email's Paul@StockBetter, Paul@StockBettor.com. If you can find any kind of a public condemnation of the declaring of martial law in Canada, I'd appreciate it if you'd send it to me. I didn't see it. And then you have some states that are, even worse than that. I mean, they're really taking the gloves off, getting nasty. In New Zealand, they have these truckers that are imitating the Canadians, and they're just dissatisfied with their governments. They're protesting, right? And no violence. They're very they're peaceful. But the New Zealanders got really tough. They started playing Barry Manilow music in a rotating circuit every 15 minutes over loudspeakers, so that the protesters, had to leave. That's really taking the gloves off down there in New Zealand. That's pretty rough. And it's just it's a tough situation. We'll see what happens, but. All the small actions that they're taking indicate that you're going to pay more for pretty much everything. How that affects the markets, it's more the political turbulence that is going to affect the markets. I mean, are the protesters successful in Canada, or is the government successful in Canada? Stock market players don't particularly care whether the stock is in an authoritarian regime or a democratic regime. All they care about is that the price goes up, right? And, that's why they invest in China, for example. They don't care, just as long as I can trade it and the price goes up. But we'll see what happens. Again, if you're aware of a politician that other than Tulsi Gabbard, all right, that is condemned the practice, please send it to me. And if we look at the markets just for last week, if you can put up graph number 2, please. I forgot to print my graphs, so I'm waiting here. But the market was down 81.89 points for the week, which is 1.82%. And there you can see it. And this is as of yesterday, Monday, the 14th, Valentine's Day. And then you can see it finished on, February 15th, below the 200-day moving average, dipped a little bit yesterday. Today, it is, when I looked earlier, it was up over 1%, and I'm looking right now, and it is up 1.4%. So it's back above the 200-day moving average again, which is that red line. And, we show this chart every week. This is from September 30th to yesterday, Monday, February 14th. And it looks like what's happening is 3,400 is the, or 4,300, excuse me, is just the absolute bottoms. Fed steps in and does whatever. But we hypothesized that they were going to try and hold a lower channel. Given the circumstances, they can't do it. And what it looks like they're trying to do is hold the 200-day moving average. And that's a different strategy. It doesn't have a pandemic premium in it. It doesn't have a guaranteed rise. But if you defend that as a low, each time the market, for whatever reasons, increases it, it causes it to ever so slightly increase because it's a 200-day moving average. And so you would end up getting, a 3, 4, 5% gain for the year. But that looks like the game. They look to have given up on the channel below the old channel. And at least for the short term, it looks like the 200-day moving average is the benchmark. But for last week, the markets were down 1.82%. So if you had $100,000, you can take that down. $100,000 in a portfolio, you should have lost $1,820, and we have our demonstration portfolios. And interesting results this week here. Our portfolios are the top 30 stocks and then the top 3 stocks every sector for a broader portfolio, because when you just take the top 30, you have a lot of internet technology and communication services and so on. But the top 30 cap weighted, where the larger the company is, the more you bought. Instead of losing $1,800, you would have lost $3,300. So the larger stocks underperformed. If you go to the top 30 equal weight, instead of losing $1,800, you would have lost $2,600. So again, underperformed, but not as badly as if you bought more of the largest stocks. If you went to the top 3 stocks in every sector so that you had a broader portfolio, you would have made some money in energy and finance, and that's it. But that would have limited your losses to only $2,550 instead of the $1,800. And if we look at the 54 stocks that we tracked, just to see what did that, 2 stocks were up, only 2, more than 2% or more than 4%, and that was Philip Morris. And the reason Philip Morris is up is because they have very little debt, generate a lot of cash flow, and pay a good dividend, right? So your dividend stocks are doing well right now. I suggested back in end of December, 1st of January, to get rid of all these things, buy dividend-paying stocks, and then, in my case, put calls against them to protect on the downside. But the dividend-paying stocks are going up. Disney's up on basically forecast results. They had their earnings call, and they talked upcoming quarters. But they were up 5.3%. You had 5 stocks that went up more than 1 but less than 2%, and that would be Boeing, on hopes that they're going to get a plane in the air, up 2.8%. Chevron, another energy company, up 2.2%. ConocoPhillips, the third energy company out of this 54, up 1.8%. Berkshire Hathaway, banking stock, and Kinder Morgan, which is another energy stock, except for it's a pipeline company, up 1.1%. Kinder Morgan's going to go down a little bit here. There's a methane cloud that was picked up on satellite over, what would it be, western Louisiana, eastern Texas. And it's the equivalent of about 150 tons of methane an hour. And it looks like a pipeline leak, and there's a pipeline that runs through there that's owned about 25% by Kinder Morgan. So their stock will be down somewhat if it's not already. I haven't checked it. But what was it? Three stocks that went up but less than 1%. JP Morgan up 0.9%. AT&T, remember they cut their dividend, up 0.2%. And Verizon was flat, basically. And then you had three stocks down less than 1%. 3M, because they reduced their outlook, particularly in their mask and respirator division, because they said that the pandemic's winding up. So they were down. Bank America Corporation down on results, and Intel Corporation, because their management is making some mistakes currently. Anyway, and then there were 10 stocks that were down more than 1%, but less than 2%. And in that group, you had Target and Lowe's and ExxonMobil and NVIDIA and Visa and Costco. And then there were 9 stocks that were down more than 2%, but less than 3%. And in that group, you had Apple and Cisco and Johnson & Johnson and Honeywell and Home Depot and Amazon and Broadcom and Walmart. So a good selection out of your top stocks. And remember that the total index was off 1.8%. And Apple and Johnson & Johnson and Honeywell and all those, Amazon, were down in between 2 and 3%. You had 8 stocks that were down more than 3%, but less than 4%. In that group, you had Procter & Gamble, prices of things going up, less sales, MasterCard, the other credit card clearing concern, Comcast, Microsoft, which is the second largest company in the world, Nike, and that's about it. And then you had 5 stocks that went down more than 4%, but less than 5%. And that would be Pfizer and Duke Energy and Netflix. And that's about it. And then you had 5 stocks that went down more than 5%, but less than 7%. And that would be UPS fell 5%. Google fell 6.3%. Tesla fell 6.9%. And what do we have here? That's it. And then you had 4 stocks that fell more than 7%. And that would be Facebook falling 7.4%. Same reason as last week. Increased expenses, building their metaverse, and a drop in subscribers. And PayPal dropping another 8.6%. So that means PayPal since last April is down about 60%. Again, I blame that on management, but and I've been saying that for whatever it is, 3 months, 4 months. And I guess that's about it. I'm about out of time. Bogdanich Perspective, and again, just the printing of the money is the root. They wouldn't be able to do this, any of this. They wouldn't be able to do any of it if they had to worry about the effect on the economy. But because they can just print the money, they don't have to worry about the effect on the economy. And this has been happening since the Bush tax cuts in 2000. Democrats said, Bush tax cuts are terrible. It's going to ruin the budget. What's the last thing they do when the Democrats lost control of the House in the midterm elections? They made the Bush tax cuts permanent. All right. Bush and, Obama functionally reduced taxes through backhanded means, made them all permanent by the time he left office. Trump comes in. Mixed bag. Raised taxes on some people, reduced taxes on others. He's the first president since Nixon. I don't think he was a great president, mind you, but he was the first president since Nixon that reduced the income tax in favor of increasing segments of the corporate tax. But that's the first guy to do that since Nixon. The Bush tax cuts and everybody before him were for wealthy individuals and corporations. And Biden, he talks about raising taxes and Build Back Better and all the rest of his stuff, can't get a bill through Congress, so the law hasn't changed. And he just tosses money around. because you can print it. The crack pipe thing. What was it? Overdose reversal medications, safe sex kits, safe smoking supplies, screening for infectious disease, sharps disposal, fentanyl test kits, syringes, wound care, like that. And it's we'll have our elections in 2022 here, November. And I think that's the primary difference between us and the Canadians. Their system is a little different. Their PMs are up for election, I think, in June 2022, but the government doesn't change under their system. Same thing with Britain, until you have a vote of no confidence, so they don't have a quote-unquote presidential election. But we have 3 more years of this, but the Congress will likely see some changes in November. And I think that keeps us calmer. I really do, than these other nations with no hope of changing anything, because they figure if they don't go out there and push on it, it'll never change. And they're probably right. But with us, if we just, sit on our hands for whatever it is, 9 more months, actually less, your primaries are going to start happening in March, April, May, right? Pennsylvania and Virginia already had their primaries end of last year, beginning of this. And, it's helpful. And so we have a better system than they do, but we have some, there's people that are next Monday is President's Day. It's a market holiday. And people are suggesting that we suspend the celebration of President's Day until we have one. But doubt whether that'll happen. I think the holiday will take place anyway. Anyway, this has been the Bogdanich Perspective. February 15th, 2002, TalkCast PDX. Do this on Tuesdays, 10 a.m. in the morning. If you want to send me an email and show me the condemnation for the Canadian declaration of martial law, or have me talk about anything else, please do so. Paul@StockBettor, Bettor.com. And see you next Tuesday, and Dividend. And that means goodbye.